what about your brand makes you you, and keep it concise. Have a very clear answer to what that product is going to do to really solve your customer's problem, and an emotional standpoint too. How does this make their lives better? There's always an emotional reason that somebody makes a purchase. So having those two things really solid in your mind before you even start to get into what are my keywords, how do I figure out who my competitors are, how do I figure out what kind of language to use. I mean, those are all next step. Start there. Being just too lengthy with the bullets, trying to keep each bullet point to around 200 characters or less. It's easy to feel like you have a lot to say, but as you pointed out yourself, you're guilty of just going through the images. So the copy, you want to be able to optimize as much as possible and have space to do that, but you have to figure out how to keep it concise, because if they do read, they're going to get bored by the first bullet. It's 500 characters long. They're not going to read bullet 2 through 5. They're going to probably get distracted by an ad on the page and click on something else and move on.
Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm super excited in this one to get into listing optimization, specifically listing optimization when it comes to really identifying your target market and then speaking to them. I have Arthur and Kelsie Gadsby from the Gadsby team. They're a husband and wife duo, which I think is super, super awesome. And we've been connecting over listings a lot. So I'm really excited to have them on and to have them share their expertise with you all.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
It's been awesome. And you know what? Honestly, we've been connected for a while. I don't remember where we got connected. I don't know if I've ever heard your origin story. So if you don't mind just giving like a quick, brief overview of how you all got into this and into the Amazon listing optimization.
Or how we got into it.
As geeks, I love the origin story. I'm like, we're Marvel heroes now.
When we were selling on Amazon, I inherently drew on my background. My background isn't in copywriting, actually. I have studied copywriting extensively, but my background is mainly in literature. So I come from the writing world. I was trained by Chuck Palahniuk, the author of Fight Club. And that's extremely fortunate because his method of writing is it's called minimalism. So it's extremely punchy. Every sentence has to have a purpose. So I wrote our listing. Things started to convert well. And I would see questions in certain Amazon groups like, hey, what do you think about my listing? And I couldn't help but tear it apart. In a nice way, just, point out things that could be done better. And it turned into an entire listing breakdown. It got longer and longer. I connected with Stephen Black, and in not so many words, he's like, what are you doing? You should be doing this. Like, you have a knack for it. So it slowly transitioned into that. I started writing listings for seller friends just for fun. Kelsie has an amazing background in SEO, and we just combine our powers, and things started to really take off.
Yeah, I worked for over 10 years now in SEO. We're on the West Coast, so we relocated when we started our Amazon business. This is going back over 7 years ago now, up to Washington. We were in LA before, in California, and I worked for a couple different pretty large SEO firms doing optimization and doing analysis for websites that were both local to like national and international businesses that sold everything that you can think of, or had different services. And a lot of my knowledge from that translated directly, we found when we started our own business on Amazon. And then we fell in love with helping people. Like, I saw what he was doing, and it kind of was this natural evolution where, as much as we loved selling on Amazon, we've always been in marketing and sales before that in LA. He was in sales before and marketing himself, but he was actually helping people on the PPC side, not actually doing PPC numbers. That's me.
We helped launch. We've helped launch brands before off of Amazon before we even started.
Yeah, so it sort of started naturally evolving, and over the last 7 years, we've continued to be, just the two of us. We've never outsourced, and we've grown to the point now where we're working with everything from mom and pop brands that are just starting off to Amazon sellers that are, multi-million a year, over 50 to 100 products. We work with people to help them specifically, just to be clear for your viewers, with the copywriting and optimization side. Anything that are words on the page or on the back end side, there's some fields that people get confused about. There's some great places to optimize there.
Yeah.
And then, of course, even the image copy is very important too. We kind of didn't plan for this. It just sort of happened to us, but we're really happy with what we do, and we love helping sellers launch products and find success on a pretty competitive space.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I love how that seems to be somewhat of a common origin story with a lot of Amazon service providers. It's like, hey, I had this skill. I learned that I can use it. It's completely transferable to the Amazon platform. And then, oh, well, other people haven't, maybe they don't have that background, or like Arthur was saying, like you have a very specific writing style that translates very well into listings, because on listing there is a character limit. Every single word should do something. So to be able to have that and then directly transfer it is really, really cool. I'm sure there's a lot of listeners out there just saying, okay, this sounds great. I would love to kind of really know your method, your secret sauce. So a lot of sellers look at their listings, and I talk to a lot of sellers and they're like, I know it could be better. I'm not really sure. I see it in the conversion rates. Like, I'm trying to figure out where and when to tackle things. If a seller is just like looking at their listing, or maybe they're looking in general to launch a product, how should they decide where to start with that?
In terms of they've identified the product and what's next? I would say from an optimization point of view, this is kind of funny because to me it's an important part of optimization, but not everybody thinks about this. So before you even get started, before you even either approach it to write it yourself or hire copywriters to do it for you, you need to have a really clear market position for yourself. Have a really solid idea of what especially if this is a brand new brand. If it's the first product in a new brand and you don't have that brand identity set yet, figure out what about your brand makes you you. And keep it concise.
Especially if the market is saturated.
Yeah, especially.
You see a lot now on Amazon.
And then with the product itself, it's the same thing. Have a very clear answer to what that product is going to do to really solve your customer's problem. And from an emotional standpoint too, how does this make their lives better? Even if it seems like something that's really bland and generic, there's always an emotional reason that somebody makes a purchase most of the time. So having those two things really solid in your mind before you even start to get into what are my keywords, how do I figure out who my competitors are, how do I figure out what kind of language to use. I mean, those are all next step. Start there, because if you don't have those answers, you can't even write a single word. You have to have that really clear in your mind. It's kind of coming from LA, we have a lot of actor friends, and so when they prep for something, I know this sounds kind of silly, but it's the same thing. Your purpose in any given scene is your super objective. So what's that super objective for your brand? If you're an eco brand, okay, what's your position in the eco space?
Yeah, a lot of what was I going to say? A lot of sellers, when you hear solve the problem, there's a generic problem that your product solves, and then there's the core reason. So assuming you have all the logistics out of the way, you've got all the numbers, all the data, you've got, your PPC campaigns, like, what you're doing and everything. As far as brand identity goes, like when Kelsie said, what problem does your product solve? Try and strike the emotion. That's where I write from. I write from the point of it's never about the product. So, we talked about the origin story earlier. One of my very first interactions with a seller who asked me, hey, can you, do a listing breakdown? He sold a really high-end massage gun. It was almost $200. And I looked at it, and, copy was pretty good. He had keywords in there and everything. Hero image looked good. His other images looked good, but a lot of it was very feature heavy. So I told him, you've got to differentiate yourself from every other massage gun out there. So, just take a look at the first 5 on the first page. Everything says it's going to ease your pain, going to make you feel better. And I said, you got to understand that your price point, your massage gun is a last resort. Nobody just wakes up and goes, yeah, I'm going to buy a $200 massage gun. No. They've tried stretching. They've tried painkillers. They've realized too many painkillers is bad. Chiropractors. Yeah, that's getting into a major expense already. They're trying YouTube videos, all the stuff. And eventually they're getting closer and closer to the realization that they're getting older and aches and pains are going to happen. And that's kind of depressing. So finally, they're going to go on Amazon. They're going to look up an expensive massage gun. So everything says the same stuff that painkillers do. It's going to ease your pain, make you feel better. I said, you don't sell a massage gun. Come from it from the perspective of you sell a time machine. So why don't you try in your second image, just feel invincible again. And just so you don't get in trouble, in parentheses, go, or close to it. And then go into the features. And he's like, all right, let me try that. And it was about a month and a half later, he wrote to me and he said, I just made that change and I sold out. And
his conversion rate shot through the roof. Yeah.
That is going levels deeper than the actual, what everybody else is saying. And I've been trying to dig deeper into it with our clients as well, because I think that's regardless of where you are, if you're selling something, you're selling a deeper need than the actual service. Like with us in advertising, if people could get away without running advertising,
Yeah.
I tell like my team all the time, I'm like, nobody actually wants to run advertising. Everyone needs to run it. Nobody wants to run it. So what are we like trying to achieve? You know, like growing sales, is it deeper than that? Is it they're going for a large exit? Are they going for bigger profits because, you know, they want the one prospect I was talking to who's like, oh, I want to bring my wife home. I want to make a profit and my wife doesn't have to work anymore. That's what they're actually going after. Advertising might be what gets them there, but that's not the end. Again, advertising.
That's their why.
That's their why. So what you're saying is if you're putting a product out in the market, you might end up getting sales from people inadvertently because they're attaching the why to the features. But if you can go a level deeper and you call out the why, then you don't have to make them do the work for you or in their mind make the connection. You're already making connections for them, which again makes you more attractive. So this is really awesome. I'd love to dig, I mean, because you've mentioned the images, you've also mentioned, you know, like listing copy. What parts of the listing do you focus on? Like where, I guess all through it, but if you're going to say infuse this kind of why into the listing, how do you go about doing that or where?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
And I think Arthur can probably answer it best, but I mean, we both actually do copy, but I have probably more time focused on the data side because that is something that I specialize in that Arthur doesn't have the background in. But when I can, I also edit what he writes. So I'm going to give my input, but I'm going to let him answer as well. I think that really it's something that should be kind of subtly, not necessarily right in your face, infused throughout the bullets for sure. There should be little reminders along the way of what it is about this product that is going to make them on an emotional level want to buy it. Whether it's feeling young again, like with the massage gun, or get out there and enjoy your day, stop being stuck at home and pain kind of thing. But giving those little reminders throughout the bullets. I think the very, very first image after the hero image, as Arthur mentioned with the recommendation he made just way back in the day before we ever started doing this, it comes from that sales background. You want to make sure you tell people as quickly as possible that when they've searched whatever term they've searched for, this meets what they emotionally had behind that search. You know, I want a massage gun for whatever pain relief, whatever that for is, right? A lot of people put in for something, for X, depends on the product, but I would always have that highlighted, whether through just the image itself, if it can display it with a lifestyle photo and it speaks that why, that emotional connection, or a good, you know, text overlay, like what Arthur gave as an example. But I don't think there's one specific place that it should be and it has to be there. I mean, it should really be something that is throughout the listing, I guess.
Yeah, a lot of people, as included just now, refer to a listing in the singular form, listing. It's actually comprised of all these different components, and each one of those needs to be optimized to 11. So title, 11. Pictures, like we are not satisfied unless our clients have photos that could be in magazines. You know, if they're just as good as the ones on Amazon, that's good. It's not enough. We want you to be able to compete on a national level.
With big brands.
Yeah, with huge established brands.
Yeah.
If you can, if it's at your disposal, go for it. The bullets, optimized. Product description, A+, everything needs to be brought up. And to go back to your original point of, you know, having that message, that why infused throughout the entire listing, we have no control over where a customer looks.
Where their eyes go.
We don't know if they're on desktop. We don't know if they're on mobile. So what I like to do is I like to take the absolute core reasons why something is awesome, and I like to repeat that in different ways. So no matter where they look, they still get hit with it. So if something is made durable, in images it'll say, you know, durable quality or something. In the bullets it'll say built to last years. In the A+, it'll be something even more grandiose. So that way, no matter where the customer looks, they're going to be like, wow, this thing.
It's reinforced.
Good. Yeah.
It's either reinforced because they've seen it multiple times, which is a
repetition.
Good repetition is a pretty standard sales technique that most people will probably heard of. But if they don't get the repetition, like Arthur said, some people may only look at the images and they've seen what they need to see, and you know the reviews are there, the price is within the budget that they're happy with, and they buy. Some people want more information information, they're going to go down and look through the A plus. And then if they want even more, then they go back and they're going to read the bullets. They're going to read more of the text, especially for higher price point items. So anything that's over $20, people will do more research. They will read. But the point is to answer the question, like Arthur and I have said, really, it's not a specific place. You want to get that in there just in case they only go here, here, here. You've got that emotional connection and that why in there for them to
That is an excellent point that I didn't even think of, which is why I have you all on, because you know more about listings. About, you know, that is so true. You want everything to be optimized, but you can't control where it is that they're looking. You know, some people read bullets. I personally am notorious for only shopping images. It's terrible. But
that's not uncommon.
Building a listing around that to allow for that variety is a really excellent point. I'd love to dig in, because I know, Kelsie, you've touched on it a couple times, and I'm sure everyone's ears have pricked up and like, oh, okay, what's that? About your background in SEO and how you also like not only speak to the shopper, the whole, you know, are you speaking to shoppers? Are you speaking to robots? Dynamic.
Yeah.
When it comes to SEO, what all goes into that? Or how do you, again, maybe just how do you start thinking about that?
Well,
this is going to be what separates us from what we've seen out there is her. She's the secret sauce.
No pressure. Gosh, that's such a great question, but also very broad. So I'll try to keep it concise without getting into my philosophy of every aspect of SEO.
Maybe we'll have to have you back on, Fred.
I think the first thing I want to say, because I think that it's really important for every seller to hear this, is that because I find that it's a really, really common thing that people start with, and it's where I don't start from. So I'm kind of going to do a little twist on what your question is, and in terms of answering it from the seller's point of view. A lot of people focus so much on what I call trophy keywords. So I don't want to just look for what is the big top 5 buying terms, because as you know from being a PPC expert, sales come from all kinds of places and places on search phrases that you wouldn't even ever imagine. So my perspective when I start off is not to go, okay, this is the 100,000 search volume term, this is the 40,000 search volume term, and just get those big guys. Because the reality is, and I know that it's not fun to hear this as a seller, but those aren't the first terms that you're going to rank for. They need to be in there, but my focus is to find your top competitors, and I'm going to look at where they're getting sales across the board and where do the majority of them. I think it's pretty standard. This isn't necessarily the secret sauce, but this is just for those that may have not heard this before. Where do the majority of those top 5 to 10 sellers rank very, very well for? Okay, so if they're all showing up, and identifying a competition is something I could have a whole nother answer to, because that's really the place to start before you can even identify terms. But finding those top terms and breaking those up into what is really truly the most relevant based off of how well they rank. So if you may use a tool as a seller and think, okay, I'm going to do this myself, awesome. I'm all for sellers. They've got the time and they want to learn how to do it and they want to write it themselves, awesome. But stay away from just running a tool and seeing what the biggest term is and trying to get those top terms. But I'll give you an example of where this can be a mistake where, I'm not going to say what the brand is, but there's a client that we're working with that he came to us and he had given his list that he did research on to a VA that didn't do any of their own research, and he is a toy product. And the toy product, it's something that is weighted, but it's just for comfort, right? But because tools are not very smart, they'll often give you terms that are related terms, but they're not relevant terms.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest keywords that popped up that he noticed when he did the seller that has no experience with optimization was weighted blanket. And he gave that word to this, VA that actually put it in his bullets. And he's never going to rank for weighted blanket. He's not a weighted blanket, and it really has no true relevancy, but they're related because maybe someone that would buy a weighted toy, plushie might also buy a weighted blanket for comfort, but you're not going to put that in your copy. Maybe in PPC, you might run a billboard ad to kind of cross-advertise on something like that.
You're going to have bad performance. No,
exactly.
Relevancy. Well, for instance, I just talked with someone else who has an object that's large size for adults. Had an issue with her agency running on search terms that favored toddlers and babies. Well, the problem is the product doesn't fit. So he actually was able to rank for that, but then consequently got enormous amounts of returns because the product didn't work for that. So sometimes if it's related, like with weighted blanket and weighted, they might not necessarily return the item, so you probably just get bad performance. But sometimes if you rank for irrelevant search terms on search pages, you can actually hurt yourself.
Absolutely.
Think like, oh great, I'm ranking, I'm getting all this traffic. If it's the wrong traffic, it doesn't do well for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think really like the most important place to start from that I start from with optimization is first truly identifying who your competitors are so that the results that you get with your research are relevant, and then knowing how to filter that information is a whole nother thing. And I think that that's probably like the hardest thing for a lot of sellers to understand is sometimes not knowing what your real terms are or thinking that they know, like there's a whole like old tried and true garlic press or water bottle. Like you're not going to rank for water bottle or garlic press most likely. It's so saturated. So you have to find like what your true primary term is, not that hero term that would be amazing if you were on the first page, but getting down to where the sales are really at, where your real competitors are really at, and finding and identifying those terms.
That's
sorry for the long answer.
No, that's been insanely valuable. I love to hear that, like that's logic is a good place to start. Like, cause it is like you said, and the thread seems to run throughout. I love for you to share, and I know you've been sharing it in snippets and kind of like weave throughout everything that you've already shared, but I love for you to just maybe quickly touch on some of the biggest mistakes people very commonly make when it comes to optimizing a listing.
Well, I usually start at the top of the title, but that's all her. Images, for one thing. We see that a lot of sellers neglect the order of your images. Imagine you're shopping for something, you're really excited about a particular product because of the hero image, you click into it, and the second image hits you with like, it's 4 feet by 6, and you're like, oh, okay. Like you want that second image to really stand out and be like, yep, you made a great decision clicking on this.
That emotional connection.
Connection. So the order of images definitely matters.
Educating.
Education. Never educate the audience; they will get bored.
Yeah, that's. I'm just going to expand on that really quickly. We had a client that we worked with on several products that were all related to each other, but variations. And they were very, very proud of their product, which is awesome. We love that. But they wanted to make sure that the client knew everything at the level they did. They're an expert on the particular materials that are used because of their background in real life, their original career. So they had more information than anyone would ever need to know buying this product. And they were convinced that it would be the selling point. And we had to explain to them, like, it's a home decor item. People are not trying to learn at this level of detail, like, why this is the best material and how, like, where it got its start. And there's definitely a way to paint that and how amazing the material is and make sure to mention it, but it shouldn't be something you could find on a Wikipedia page.
Yeah.
Other mistakes.
Well, yeah, just to give you another quick example. When I write a listing, I always think if you saw this product out in the wild and you complimented somebody on it, what would the first thing out of their mouths be after, hey, thanks? Would it be, yes, I love this too, it has silicone dioxide in it? Or what? Or, would it be like, yeah, this makes me feel great after a workout? Like, you those things. So don't educate the customer. If it absolutely has to be in there, like material,
size, obviously, weight,
that is important. It's got to be in there, but not like right off the get-go.
Being just too lengthy with the bullets So a pretty kind of standard practice now for most experienced listing optimization copywriters, most people have learned that the bullets really don't index very well past 1,000 characters total. So trying to keep each bullet point to around 200 characters or less, it's easy to feel like you have a lot to say, but as you pointed out yourself, you're guilty of just going through the images. So the copy, you want to be able to optimize as much as possible and have space to do that, but you have to figure out how to keep it concise, because if they do read, they're going to get bored by the first bullet. It's 500 characters long. They're not going to read bullet 2 through 5. They're going to probably get distracted by an ad on the page and click on something else and move on, because they need to get that information quickly from the customer side.
The average shopper online, the last time I checked, their attention span was 8 seconds. So you have 3.
About right.
Yeah, you have 3 to catch them. Otherwise, they're already looking for an excuse to bounce. Like, got to catch their attention in 3 seconds and keep them scrolling, keep them interested.
Yeah, keyword stuffing. So I've seen this a lot. Coming from the optimization background that I have, one thing that stands true with Amazon is most search engines, and Amazon is a search engine as much as it's a selling platform, their algorithm, their bots do not use to be extremely repetitive with your search terms. So if you are trying to optimize your listing, your bullets, your product description, try to stay away from those sentences where you're basically like, it is great to be a this, and then you literally just have 10 search phrases in a row. You're laughing because it's really common, right?
Because we've all seen it. We've all either looked at clients or prospects listings, or we've been shopping ourselves, and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. And the thing is, customers are a lot wiser and more educated and more familiar with those tactics these days, and they see that for what it is. So it can actually hurt your rankings too, because if it looks like you're stuffing and you've basically overused a word, even just a single word, because it's in every phrase that you're using, you consistently keep using the same root term, that can actually hurt the performance of the listing, because it is just like I said, it's with Google, even they'll see it as keyword stuffing on Amazon, and they will ding that listing in the background. You won't know it. You won't not know why it's not performing well, but it doesn't benefit you at all, and it reads terribly.
Yeah, I've seen like in the bullet field, I've seen a keyword repeat like 9 times or something. It was the same one. It was long tail too, and I asked, why do you have this 9 times in the listing? And they said, well, I heard that that way the algorithm gets it. It's like, yeah, I think it gets it. I think that's too much. Maybe add some different keywords in there.
One other thing I would say too, probably a surprisingly common mistake, is not having lifestyle images at all, or not having enough. A lot of people are really in love with doing the 3D, images, which is great. We actually are connected with a studio that does amazing work for stuff if you need a 3D scan done, and they can put your product in all kinds of different settings. But you need to have at least one, depending on the product, but even just a hand, just a really simple photo where there's some human element, because conversion rates with photos of people where they can identify themselves, the customer can find themselves in the listing, it's infinitely better than without. So I'm surprised actually over the years how many people we've worked with where we had to be like, you've got to get some lifestyle photography.
Yeah, I'll get really geeky, because like I mentioned earlier, we like to get really, really granular. So we like to tell clients, if your product is right for it and you have a lifestyle image with a model in it, say with a child, have the child look at the product. Not at the camera, not at the audience. Have them look at the product and smile. It's the little trick we learned from Coke, because conversions will shoot up, because it tells your potential customer, hey, if I get this thing, my child will be like that child and smile.
Yeah, or it'll make me happy. They're happy.
Yeah, exactly. So
happy sells really well right now over like the super serious models.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll mention, which we both feel really strongly about, is speak to your audience directly. So if you click on something that is, look around the house, just very home decor-ish, right? And you're scrolling through the photos and you see the most beautiful like little plant or something, like one of these things. And it has, like UFC font on it. It's going to cause like a weird disconnect. You're going to be like, what? Like a sports drink thing, or the colors are off. Like if you're using red, we like to get really, really particular with those things. So everything about your listing has to speak to your direct audience, from maybe the slang terms that are used, the brand colors, just everything. Font is also really important. Target spent millions of dollars, like the actual stores, to change their signs on the outside of their stores to all lowercase because they found out they get more customers in if it's lowercase. So don't know why that is, but if Target does it, you should do it.
Yeah. No, humans are weird that way. I don't know why, but there is something about things that connect aesthetic. I mean, we all try and do it, in our homes or in anything that we touch with, like you want it to connect and flow, and it doesn't have to match, but it has to go together and creates a pleasant experience. Like you said, especially if you can, in the beginning, learn your shopper, which I'm sure we're going to come around again to. I have just 2 more questions for you. I appreciate you all staying here and taking the time for this. So I would love to get your take on the rise of AI and everyone, because it is a language model, and it's been kind of crazy to me that AI has come out with language, which, I mean, there's so many interesting applications of it. But one application that has been very prominent, especially in the Amazon community, is with having the ability to write your listings. So where do you all see that going? How do you see those performing from somebody who is in the listing optimization game? I'd love to get your take on this.
That's a great question.
Well, I've used the majority of it. I use AI pretty much every day in the hopes that it can make my job faster. I got really excited. I was like, this is going to be great. And is to a certain point. So I have repeatedly broken ChatGPT. I have screenshots to prove it. They're hilarious answers because the prompts, the answers that it gives you are only as good as the prompts that you give it. Mm-hmm. So the kinds of prompts that I'm giving it to it are, I would say, very out of the box because a lot of the times it's just scraping from knowledge that it takes from the actual product itself. And as we both mentioned earlier, it's not really about the product, it's what's behind that. You get like really, really generic answers in a lot of cases. Yeah. And for me anyway, I'm closer to a finished edit than 3, 4, 5 of AI's answers. And because it doesn't understand the prompts that I'm giving it. I'm coming from a very emotional standpoint, and it just tells me about the product. But I've seen some really funny things. Like, I gotta say, it does look very impressive. I watched this video presentation the other day, and it was about, tell me about the audience who would buy a cat tower. And I was like, this is great, because we actually just bought one last week. So I was like, I'm the audience. I get to watch, the prompts. Yeah. So I watched the prompts, and it's incredible that it spits it out in 10 seconds. You're like, wow, that's really impressive, until you actually read it. Mm-hmm. I think the first thing it said was, the target audience of this product loves cats. And it's like,
no kidding.
Yeah, I know. And they either live in a house or an apartment. And I was like, where else would you live other than a house or an apartment? And it spits out the information very quickly, but it doesn't get to the actual heart of the issue. So if you're a seller using AI, I would say don't be afraid to dig deeper. Don't be afraid to break it. If you've broken it and it starts giving you the most unhinged answers, you're on the right track.
Yeah. So to add on to that, in everything that I have seen, everything that I have read, I've talked to friends that we have that are also in the marketing space. I was just talking to a friend of mine yesterday that does photography, because obviously it's not just for copywriting or just, I guess some students have been using it for papers in school, I've heard. That's not going over so well. So the thing that I was discussing with this friend of mine, and Arthur and I have talked about this too, is that I think it's a very good tool in the right hands.
Oh, yeah.
You have to know enough to know what questions to ask it. So, and that goes for a lot of tools, right? You can get something like Helium 10 and have no idea where to start with which ASINs to put into, competitor tool section of Helium 10. You may pick the wrong ones and not get the right terms back, right? That are really going to be helpful. With something like ChatGPT, because I've watched Arthur do it before, and I've tested it a little bit too. If you're too broad with your question, or you're not, basically if you're not specific enough, you're not going to get back the kind of content that might be a good, starting place or give you some ideas. I would say that it's like anything else. I think it's a great research tool, but I don't think it replaces humans yet. And I don't know how long it's going to be before that is even possible, because the thing to keep in mind, and a lot of people forget this with this tool, is that when it was built, it cuts off the knowledge that it has at the point that it launched. So any new products that get launched, any improvements that come along that are pretty standard in existing products, any advancements, it's not going to have that knowledge, right? So if you're trying to have it write something about a product that you've made changes to that already exists in the market, you've improved it somehow, you're using a different material, you've changed a clip that usually breaks on a dog leash, there's so many different very specific things that your competition's it's going to be pulling from other existing Amazon listings out there. So what you're going to get back is pretty generic copy.
Or just information.
Yeah, or just information, blogs, that kind of thing.
Yeah, for me, I just happen to not think of that way because of my background. So I have used, I've studied people who go to spas for beauty products. I studied the car engine niche for a piece of workout equipment. So I'm combining two things, to talk about this other thing.
Yeah, and I also think that, it's not going to, because I'm so particular with data research, I think that it may be able to create some decent readable copy, but it's not necessarily going to be optimized either. There's a lot of technical stuff that goes into that. I mean,
I think it'll replace copywriters, but listing optimization is
like you said, it can be a really great idea generator, and I've played around with it myself, trying to give it prompts and information and like brain dump, because I'm like, if you could, because it does have a lot of information in it, if you could put in write something around this topic and it could learn the way I type and talk, like I could infinitely increase my social media outputs. And I've gotten it kind of ish close, but every single one I've had to edit, and I have some people just like, it's pretty good. So if you're just going to stick on a post, I see no issue with it. I think it's
no, not at all. It's great. It's great for image copy.
Yeah, but it gets it almost there. And I would agree with you. Like, if you're really digging into it and you want to get it right, having some sort of human, because at the end of the day, we're humans talking to humans.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Humans. At some point, they'll probably fool us, but we're not quite there yet.
If you want to break it, just ask it for 10 more. 10 more, 10 more. By the third time you say, give me 10 more variations of the original idea, it has no idea what to do. And it's very amusing.
Yeah, but overall, like I said, I think that it's a great tool. It's something that can be even like a good writing prompt for people that have, blogs that they keep up for, either their brand or their services. I think that especially for things like that, where they're just trying to pump out, content that they can go in and edit with their voice, like you're talking about, that's great. But for either a Shopify storefront, which we work on those too, websites, Amazon, you need to definitely have that human element in there touching it. Otherwise, I don't believe that it will perform as well.
Yeah. Personally. No, I would say your insights onto what you've seen and I've been pretty much aligned with things that I've seen. This has been insanely informative, and I love how you all have kind of colored this conversation with your own take on it, which is, I think, very different from a lot of the things people are saying in this space. So I really appreciate you all sharing. I'm trying to close out these, which I think you kind of touched on it in your answers to the first question. But if someone is listening to this and say, okay, this is amazing, I want to take a look at my listings from a fresh eye. I really, like we said in the beginning, I know I need to make changes. I feel like I have an idea of where I should start. What would you say is the first step you would recommend somebody take?
Actually, the first thing that I would do, if you feel like you need to make an improvement to your listing, is ask yourself why. Is it because your conversion rate is not what you want it to be? Do you think it should be higher, which is that unit session percentage in your business reports? Are you seeing that coming in quite low? If it's under 10%, personally, I think that's the bare minimum. You'd like to see 10% and higher. Some spaces are extremely competitive, so it may be a little lower than that, but I'm not really satisfied if I'm not seeing that personally. Are you seeing a really terrible click-through rate with your ads? Are you getting a lot of clicks, but you're not getting the conversion? So you're having a lot of traffic traffic, and you can see that with your ads. And is your price point on average comparable to your competitors? That's a big one. So before even touching the listing copy and figuring out like what to change, ask yourself those questions. And depending on what the answers are to those questions will be what decides what your next step is. Okay, so for example, I'm getting a lot of clicks, so my hero image must be really good because people are seeing something that they like in my hero image. They're seeing enough information in my title that they identify that this is the product that I'm searching for. And my price point isn't scaring people away. Okay, so what is inside that listing that's preventing people from converting? So you have to, I think, split test at that point and start looking at, okay, is there something in the copy that we can improve upon where we're not speaking enough to the audience? Or what is it about the image order or the current images that we have that we might be able to test? I think the worst mistake you can make is trying to change everything to fix a problem. So unless you have someone do an audit that has the experience to really understand and identify what those problems are, you know, maybe the seller really feels like they can be honest with themselves, but sometimes you need that third eye, even if it's just someone to take an audit of the listing and say, okay, this is what we feel is going on. That can give you a starting point where you can maybe take care of the problem on your own, or you might realize that you need to hire somebody to do better images for you, do better optimized copy for you, whatever it may be.
Yeah, on the topic of copy, you know, I used to, when we first started, I used to think, well, no one's ever going to read this. Like, you know, not really. Until I started to see like actual just regular Amazon customers quote the copy that I would write on the listing. That is
people do read.
That's amazing. I was like, oh crap. And it kept happening and happening. So there are a lot of Amazon listings that sell just fine with terrible copy. And my point is, you know, what if you had changed it? How much more would they be selling? How much more money are they leaving on the table? So I've learned that people will read the copy if the price point is above $20.
Yeah, $20. Like we mentioned earlier.
If it's topical, ingestible.
If it's for their child.
Yeah, especially if it's for their child or their pet.
Yeah.
They're going to read it. They're not going to sit there reading it like a book, but they're going to scan it a little bit and pay a little.
Yeah, definitely. You said ingestible. Yeah, supplements.
Yeah, supplements.
Yeah, I think that there's not really a right answer to the very first place because it's going to be unique to each listing. So not to give you kind of a non-answer, but hopefully that gives people kind of a direction where you're feeling maybe like it's not performing as well as it could, or you know that you're doing well, but you want to do even better in your space. So what's that thing that could get you that extra 5% of sales or extra 10% of the pie, right? So, you know, sometimes it's a really small change. Sometimes it's something as little as, I'll give you a perfect example. So we have a client with a name that is, with a brand name that is 3 words long. Okay. So getting into kind of like the technical stuff with titles, the first 40 characters have a lot of weight to them. The whole title is important. It has the most weight in the entire listing for your indexing and identifying to the algorithm what your product is and figuring out, you know, where to rank you. If you're using up a lot of valuable real estate at the beginning with a very long brand name, something to think about when you're naming your brand, guys, that is going to actually hurt that first search phrase that you have. So that can a lot of times be like the simplest thing. So as far as where to start, it could be just going, okay, can I say, if your entire name for Junglr was Junglr PPC, you know, advertised Junglr PPC solutions, I would say just use Junglr, right? Yeah. You're not going to use the entire LLC name or brand name. And customers, by the way, they're not going to refer to you that way either. Once you have built a brand identity and recognition, they're just going to usually use the first name or maybe 2 words. So if you can make sure to use that real estate, I would say is a big thing that I see to start with, is make sure that you're really taking advantage of that title, because just that small change, I can't tell you how much it can improve your ranking on the page, just that little thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's about starting with taking a truthful look at every part of the listing and identifying and analyzing where it's doing well, where it's not. Look at the PPC side numbers, look at the business report numbers and competitors, price point. We had, sorry to make this answer kind of long, but I think it's really important because it can be very overwhelming, I think, for clients to like, what do I do? How do I make this better? So another client of ours who's actually, congrats to them, they actually sold their business and they've moved on now to doing consulting consulting. That's cool. But when we first started working for them, they were one of only 2 products in the space.
I know who you're talking about.
If I tell you what the product is, you would laugh because there are thousands of them now. So over a year ago, there was only one competitor really, truly, and it was something that they found through social research, like social media research, and it was really hot on social media. They're like, okay, we're going to do it and we're going to do it better. And so there weren't a ton of terms. So we ended up re-optimizing for them later on, and then they did really well. They expanded, started selling more versions of this product, and then they came to us about a year after, and they were like, hey, you know, the numbers for like the main one have started to kind of dip. Can you take a look at it and see what you think the issue is? And they were wondering if it just needed to be re-optimized again. And after I looked at every aspect, it became very clear that, because frankly, there was a lot of new Chinese sellers in the marketplace that will drive the price point down, that their price point became super premium. They were 20% above the average market price. And they had a really good profit margin, so they were able to bring that price down. And I mean, I think they tested just $1 or $2 less, and even that increased their sales. And then they kept A/B testing every other week.
Every time we see this product, I think it's partially our fault, because we did one of the first listings for it, and now it's like everywhere. And it's just like, we're so sorry.
Yeah, but that's very big.
Well, no.
I mean, I guess they sold it, so it doesn't really matter.
It wasn't a garlic press, but it was something that was also used in the kitchen, and we put
and it's made of bamboo.
We put the secret sauce on it. The secret sauce, by the way, is, real quick, it's every word in the bullet field and their product description serves an SEO purpose. So it's not just, nice copy, keyword, nice copy, keyword. Because of what Kelsie can do, every single word is actually optimized. But we did that with this listing, as we do now with all the listings that we work on, and it just shot up, and the product is still being chosen as a good product to sell.
That is amazing. Well, I mean, with all of this, just to close it out, I'd love for you to quickly give a plug to yourselves. Like, if somebody is interested, they're like, all right, this sounds awesome. I need somebody to take a look at my stuff. I need someone to help. Where can they get a hold of you?
The best way would be via email. So right now our website is under construction. So if you want to reach out to us, you can go to teamgadsbyhelp@gmail.com. If you want to reach either of us directly with a question, we're always open to taking a peek at a listing. Just we do that out of just the interest to help fellow sellers that are out there that might not be sure if they really need to optimize or re-optimize their listing. So you can reach either me or Arthur directly at kelsie.gadsby@gmail.com or arthur.gadsby@gmail.com. Okay. And we do free listing audits. So
we flat out told people there's nothing wrong with this. It's your price or something, if there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, if the copy is great and it's really well optimized, we're not looking to pull anybody into re-optimizing a listing, because it's a complete waste of time, and it actually could hurt their sales, because updating a listing is it's a delicate process. You want to do it in chunks. You don't want to change every single thing. We usually recommend doing it over the course of a week. So we're happy to take a peek at what you've got if it's not like a fresh launch. And then I don't know if you wanted me to mention it here, but we're extending a 20% discount to anyone that either is a Junglr client, or even if you just see this video and you're interested in working with us, just mention Junglr or this interview. And
Oh, awesome. Well, that is very generous of you. And as always, links are down in the description. If you want that information, go down there, get a hold of Kelsie and Arthur. I'm sure you will be very happy with yourself and your conversion rates as well. Thank you all for being on. This has been absolutely fabulous. So much good information here, and thanks for sharing.
yeah, thank you so much for having us. It was fun.